The church was quiet enough to hear the hum of the ceiling fan turning slow circles over our heads. Joylene stood there at the podium, her hand shaking around a folded paper she'd read 100 times at home. The words weren't fancy, but they were hers. You could see the fight in her shoulders, the same way her grandmother used to stand when the world said she didn't belong somewhere. Someone in the second pew whispered, "Lord, they really lettin' her speak?" It rippled through the room like wind through cornstalks, soft but cutting. I sat on the front row, hands clasped tight in my lap, and told myself to breathe. The lilies near the casket had already begun to wilt from the heat, their sweetness mixing with old wood and perfume. That smell wrapped around me, thick as memory. Joylene cleared her throat once, twice. "Good mornin'," she said, her voice rough like gravel in the road. A few heads turned, a few eyes rolled, but she didn't flinch. "Grandma ain't never cared what folks thought about how she sounded," she said. "She just said what needed sayin'." Her accent came out strong, proud, southern to the bone. The choir director shifted in her seat. Aunt Shine tilted her hat just enough to hide her frown. I felt my stomach tighten. For a moment I wanted to reach out and whisper, "Baby, don't let them shake you." But then Joylene looked at me, and I saw something steady in her eyes, like she'd already made peace with whatever came next. The light through the stained glass fell across her face in colors, blue, gold, red. It made her look almost holy. She began reading. Grandma worked her fingers raw, cleanin' for folks who never said thank you. But she kept her spirit soft. She never let nobody tell her she wasn't enough. A low murmur rolled through the pews. Somebody coughed, just to break the silence. Joylene's voice trembled, but it didn't break. "And when they told me I sound too ghetto to speak at her funeral," she said, "I thought maybe they right. Maybe I should just keep quiet. But then I remembered how Grandma said, 'God don't make no mistakes, not even in your tongue.'" The crowd shifted again, uneasy now. Aunt Shine's lips pressed together so tight the lipstick cracked. That was the moment I realized Joylene wasn't up there to read a eulogy. She was there to testify. Her voice grew stronger, one syllable at a time. "Grandma taught me that voice is a kind of prayer," she said, "and prayers don't need polish." A few folks bowed their heads. Others sat stiff, pretending to flip through hymn books. Outside, a siren wailed faint and far away. Inside, all I could hear was my daughter's breath between words. For a second, she paused, eyes glistening. The paper in her hand trembled. I thought she might stop, but she straightened her back and said softly, "Grandma said, the only shame is silence." A long pause fell. The air felt thick enough to hold. Then she looked straight at Aunt Shine. "So I guess proper don't mean honest." Gasps fluttered through the room. One woman clutched her pearls. Another mouthed, "Lord, have mercy." Joylene didn't move. She stood in that silence like it belonged to her now. From the front pew, I whispered, almost to myself, "That's my baby." For a moment, even the fans seemed to stop turning. Joylene stared down at her paper, then back up, like she was seeing all the years that had pushed her into that single breath. "I used to hate how I talked," she went on, voice lower now, almost trembling. "Folks at school said I sound like I ain't been nowhere. Boss at work said I needed to sound more professional if I ever wanted to move up. Even family told me to hush sometimes, said my words came out too rough." Someone in the back muttered amen without meaning to. Joylene gave a small smile that barely showed, the kind that breaks your heart a little because you can tell it's been waiting years to come out. "But Grandma," she said, "child, them words came through your people, not around them. Every sound you make been paid for." I felt a sting behind my eyes, the kind that warns you tears are coming whether you want them or not. The sunlight shifted. A thin beam found the edge of the coffin and bounced toward the podium. Dust hung in the air like tiny ghosts dancing. Joylene lifted her chin. "So today I'm going to speak like she taught me. Might not be perfect, might not be fancy, but it's real, and real was all she ever wanted." A hush settled over the church again. Even Aunt Shine stopped fanning herself. I could hear the echo of Joylene's heels when she stepped forward, closer to the microphone. The paper crackled softly in her hand. "Grandma used to hum when she ironed folks' shirts," she said. "Said singing kept her from crying. I used to laugh at her songs, said they sounded old. Now I catch myself humming the same ones when I'm too tired to pray." Her voice caught for the first time, a small break that made the whole room lean in. "I miss that sound," she whispered. "I miss her." The pianist, bless her heart, laid a single note, just one soft chord that hung there like permission. Joylene wiped her cheek with the back of her hand and breathed out a laugh that wasn't quite a laugh. "Y'all said I wasn't fit to read no eulogy," she said. "But Grandma, she'd be laughing right now. She'd say, 'Girl, tell them the truth and let the Lord sort the rest.'" A few chuckles scattered through the room, nervous but real. Then Joylene's tone shifted, heavy again. "Truth is, she never got treated right by most of the people sitting here. Some of y'all forgot how much she gave, but she forgave you anyway." The sentence landed like thunder behind glass. Nobody moved. I heard someone's ring tap against a pew, slow and accidental. Outside, a breeze pressed through the cracked window, moving the lace curtain like a sigh. Joylene folded the paper once more, her fingers steady now. She told me, "One day they gon' hear you, baby. Don't you worry how you sound, just speak." So that's what I'm doing. She looked up again, and this time the tears came without shame. I leaned forward, heart full, knowing we'd just crossed into a place we couldn't turn back from. Joylene drew in a deep breath, the kind that comes from somewhere below the ribs, and when she let it go, her voice came out low, shaking, full of breath, but not fear. "Grandma told me once," she said, "that the Lord don't only hear the ones that talk pretty. He hears the ones that speak plain, from the belly, where truth live." Someone sniffled. A child whispered, "Mama," before being hushed. The room had changed. You could feel it like a storm cloud thinning out, light trying to get through. Her eyes were shining now. "So if my voice too ghetto for y'all," she said, "then I guess heaven gon' sound a little ghetto too." For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then, softly, somebody laughed, a small, startled sound, and a few others followed, not mocking, but breaking the tension. The sunlight hit her face full now, bright enough that she squinted, but didn't look away. She looked down at the casket, at the flowers that had started to brown at the edges. "Rest easy, Grandma," she whispered. "You raised me right." The paper slipped from her hand to the floor, fluttering once like a leaf. From the pew behind me, a woman whispered, "Lord, she done said what we all been thinkin'." Another voice, older, full of pride, said, took somebody with courage." Joylene turned from the microphone and stepped away from the podium, her eyes still wet, but her mouth set firm. She walked back down the aisle slow, head high. Her dress brushed against the wooden pews, that deep plum fabric catching the light like wine. People turned as she passed, some smiling through tears, some unable to meet her gaze. When she reached me, I took her hand. It was trembling, warm, alive. "Ma," she whispered, "you think I went too far?" I shook my head just a little, enough for her to see. "Baby," I said, "you went exactly where you needed to." A single note from the organ hummed behind us, soft and trembling. Then, from somewhere in the back, Aunt Shine's voice called out, "Well, she sure got her mama's mouth." But there wasn't meanness in it this time, just something like surrender. Joylene didn't turn around. She just kept walking toward the doors, sunlight spilling in from the church steps, bright enough to make her blink. Outside, the air was warm, the world loud again, cars, birds, a siren far off. She stood for a moment on the steps, the paper forgotten inside, her shoulders straight, her breathing even. Inside the church, folks were still whispering, the kind of whisper that means something's changed, but nobody quite knows how to name it. I sat there, the smell of lilies and old wood around me, and I thought about how many years it takes for a voice to find itself. That was the day my daughter stopped hiding behind other people's words. That was the day I stopped being afraid of her power. The morning after the funeral plans got set, I remember the way the light came through Joylene's kitchen window, pale and cold like dishwater. The place smelled of instant coffee and bleach. She'd been up all night finishing laundry for one of her clients, the little apartment quiet except for the buzz of the refrigerator that never quite closed right. Joylene sat at the small table, hair tied back, wearing her work scrubs, even though she wasn't on shift yet. She looked at me over a chipped mug and said, "Ma, they don't want me talking at the service." She said it calm, like she'd been expecting it. Still, I heard the crack underneath. They said my accent too country, too ghetto, that I'd embarrass the family. She tried to laugh, but it came out dry. Guess I ain't never learned how to sound right for nobody. I set my hand over hers. The skin on her fingers was rough, calloused from hospital gloves and long nights. "You don't need to sound like nobody else," I told her. "Your grandma loved how you spoke, said your voice had truth in it." Joylene shrugged, staring at the wall where a school picture of Anaya hung crooked. "Truth don't pay rent, Ma." That line sat between us. The old wall clock ticked louder than usual. She pushed her mug away, grabbed her phone, started scrolling through bills. I could see the wear in her eyes, the kind of tired that don't sleep out. "You know what they said at work yesterday?" she asked. "Supervisor told me I sound uneducated, said I should take a class on professional communication." I tried to find words, but what could I say that wouldn't sound like comfort on a bruise? So I said, "Baby, sometimes they just jealous they can't speak with music in their mouth." She smiled a little then, but it was the kind of smile that fades before it settles. When I got up to leave, she hugged me tight, the way she used to when she was a girl. I could feel her heartbeat fast against mine. "Don't worry, Ma," she whispered. "I'll just stay quiet at the service. Let them have their perfect speeches." Her voice was steady, but I knew silence wasn't peace, it was surrender. Later that evening, Aunt Shine called me. "Ora Mae," she said, "you know we can't have Joylene up there talking all street at Mama's funeral. Folks gon' think we didn't raise her right." I held the phone a moment before answering. "We did raise her right," I said softly. "We raised her honest." Aunt Shine huffed. "Honest don't mean loud. Let one of the church ladies do it." When the call ended, I sat in the quiet, the lamp throwing a small circle of light on the floor. I thought about how many times women in our family had been told to hush, to soften, to fit. Outside, sirens passed on the main road, then faded away. The house felt too still. That night, I dreamed of Mama, the one we were burying soon, standing at her old ironing board, humming one of her hymns, the smell of starch and heat in the air. She looked over her shoulder at me and said, "Don't let 'em steal her sound, Ora." I woke with her words still ringing, the same way a bell keeps echoing long after it's struck. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights never seemed to turn off. They flattened everything, the people, the color of the walls, even Joylene's spirit some days. I used to wait for her in the parking lot sometimes, watch her come out after a double shift. She'd have her hoodie pulled over her scrubs, shoes squeaking from the mop water she'd walked through. One evening, she slid into my car, let out a sigh that came from deep down. "Ma, I've been here 12 hours. They still call me girl like I ain't got a name." She rubbed her temples. Then the head nurse said, "Joy, if you want to move up, you got to learn how to speak properly." I asked her what that mean. She said, "You know, lose the slang." I said, "You mean lose myself?" She laughed like I told a joke. I watched her hands as she talked, chapped, little cuts near the nails, the kind that come from constant washing. She went quiet a moment, then said, "It's funny. The patients like me fine. Old Mr. Davis on the 3rd floor says he don't understand half them nurses till I talk to him." She gave a tired smile. "Guess my ghetto voice don't sound too bad when you just need kindness." The car smelled like fried chicken from the paper bag I'd brought her. She opened it, tore a piece apart, but didn't eat. "Ma, you ever feel like the world only clap when you whisper?" I didn't answer right away. Outside, a janitor pushed a cart across the parking lot, the wheels squealing. "All the time," I said finally. "But I learned the trick is to keep talking anyway." Joylene laughed softly. "You always make it sound simple." "It ain't simple," I said. "It's necessary." She looked out the window then, eyes following the streetlights blinking on. "Sometimes I wish I could be quiet," she murmured. Maybe then they'd stop looking at me like I'm a problem. The words hung there. I wanted to tell her that silence only makes folks more comfortable in their ignorance. But the weariness on her face told me she didn't need a sermon, just space. A week later, we gathered at Aunt Shine's house for Sunday dinner. The smell of greens and ham hock filled the air, laughter bouncing off the walls. But it wasn't the warm kind. It had edges. Joylene showed up late, still in her scrubs. She kissed Anaya on the forehead, slipped into a seat. Aunt Shine looked her over like she was inspecting a dress for stains. "Baby," Shine said, "you couldn't change before comin'? We got guests." Joylene smiled small. "Didn't have time. Been working since sunup." Shine sniffed. "Well, bless your heart. You know your grandma always said presentation matters." Joylene's fork paused mid-air. "Yeah," she said quietly. "But she also said don't judge nobody by their outfit." The table went still for a heartbeat, then conversation picked up again, louder now, trying to drown the tension. I watched Joylene pick at her plate, shoulders drawn in, like she was folding herself smaller. Later, while she washed dishes alone, I went to her. "You don't owe nobody an apology for who you are," I said. She gave a half laugh. "Try telling them that." That was the night she found out about the funeral arrangements, how Aunt Shine had already chosen who'd speak. I could see the disappointment slip across her face like shadow. "She said I could hand out programs," Joylene said, voice brittle. "That's her way of saying stay quiet." Her eyes filled, but she blinked them dry. "It's fine, Ma. It's fine." I knew it wasn't. The night Mama passed, the rain came hard. It beat against my window in long sheets, loud enough to make me sit up in bed before the phone even rang. When I saw the number, I already knew. Hospitals don't call that late unless the news is final. Joylene drove me there before dawn. She didn't talk much on the way, just kept her hands tight on the steering wheel, knuckles white, lips moving in a prayer she didn't say out loud. The wipers kept time like a metronome. When we reached the room, the nurse nodded, kind but tired, and slipped out to give us privacy. Mama looked small under the blanket, her hands folded the way she used to when she was waiting for the pie to set. There was a Bible open on the side table, one of those old ones with pages thin as onion skin. Joylene went to the window, looked out at the rain-streaked glass. "She gone?" she asked. I nodded. She stood there a long moment before saying, "They gon' try to make it a big fancy service, huh?" "Probably," I said. "That's what Shine do." Joylene turned, eyes red but steady. "Then you know they ain't gon' want me up there." I wanted to tell her it didn't matter, that what she said to her grandma while she was still alive mattered more than any words at a funeral. But she was already carrying that weight. So I just put my arm around her shoulders and let her lean. We buried Mama a week later. The day after the burial, Shine called a family meeting at her house. She had her planner open, pages full of names, flowers, catering. "We need someone to do the reading," she said, looking around the table. "Somebody who can speak clearly. Pastor Mike can help if we don't got nobody." Joylene sat quiet, stirring sugar into her coffee, though she'd already made it too sweet. Shine went on. "Ora Mae, maybe you could. You got the soft voice." I looked at Joylene. She kept her eyes down. I said, "Mama would have wanted Joylene to speak." The table went still. Shine laughed a little too loud. "Now, sister, you know I love that child, but she sound rough sometimes. The people from church, the deacon board, they expect dignity." Joylene lifted her head, slow. "You mean they expect white," she said, quiet but sharp. Shine's eyes widened. "Don't you put words in my mouth." "I didn't have to," Joylene said. "They already there." Shine slammed her planner shut. "I'm trying to do what's right for Mama's memory." Joylene stood. "Then let me talk, 'cause I'm the one still remembers her songs." The room went cold. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hesitate. I saw Shine's mouth open, ready to scold, but I raised my hand. "Let her," I said. "She got something to say." Shine shook her head, muttered something about regret, but she didn't argue further. Later, in the car, Joylene was quiet again. I asked, "You sure you ready for that?" She nodded, watching the streetlights flicker across the windshield. "I've been quiet long enough, Ma." At home that night, I heard her through the thin walls, practicing. Her voice rose and fell, stumbling over words, starting again. Once I peeked in. She sat on the couch with that same folded paper she'd carry to the podium later. Her lips moved silently, her fingers tracing each line like prayer beads. When she caught me watching, she smiled small. "I ain't trying to sound fancy," she said. "Just true." I said, "That's all the Lord ever asked for." She went back to reading, her voice steadier each time. The sound filled the little apartment, soft at first, then strong enough to drown out the hum of the fridge. And for the first time in a long while, I could feel pride standing up inside me again, tall and sure. The morning sun came in soft, slipping between gray clouds like it didn't want to disturb the day. I could hear the city already waking, buses sighing, somebody's radio low in the distance. Joylene was in her bedroom, door cracked open. The smell of hair grease and pressed cotton drifted out into the hall. She'd laid her dress across the bed last night, that deep plum one, ironed flat and hanging from the chair like it had been waiting years for this day. When I stepped in, she was standing at the mirror with her head wrap half-tied, curls pinned back, the ends still warm from the curling iron. She caught my reflection behind her and said, "I don't look like no speaker." I smiled. "You look like truth in Sunday clothes." She laughed once, the sound small but real. "That'll have to do." On the dresser sat her folded paper, edges soft from too much handling. A pen lay across it, like she was scared to lose her place. Her little girl, Ania, came padding in wearing her white dress shoes. "Mama, you ready?" Joylene crouched down, fixed one of Ania's braids, kissed the top of her head. "Almost, baby. You be good in the church, you hear?" "I will," the child said. Then she looked at me. "Grandma, is everybody gonna cry?" I touched her cheek. "Some will, some need to." We drove there slow, windows cracked to let in the warm air. Joylene kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting over that folded paper in her lap. I wanted to talk, but she needed the silence, the kind that helps you gather up courage like thread. When we pulled into the church parking lot, the crowd was already thick, black suits, hats in every shade of sorrow, folks hugging on the sidewalk with voices that shook. The building itself looked smaller than I remembered, the bricks darker, the windows older. Inside, the air smelled of lilies and polished wood. The choir hummed quietly, the organ playing something soft enough to blend with the rustle of programs being folded and refolded. Aunt Shine was by the front doors, directing people where to sit like she owned the place. When she saw Joylene, her smile faltered for just a second. "Morning," she said. "Morning," Joylene answered. Her tone wasn't sharp, just firm, the kind of steady that can't be moved once it's found balance. Aunt Shine's eyes dropped to the paper in Joylene's hand. "You sure you got that all ready?" "Been ready," Joylene said. Then she walked past. I followed, holding Ania's hand. Every step down that aisle felt heavier, like the floor remembered every argument our family ever had. We sat near the front. Mama's casket gleamed under the light, the same color as dark honey. Someone had arranged her favorite flowers, gardenias and white roses, but I could smell the starch of her old aprons in my memory, stronger than any bouquet. Joylene stared straight ahead. Her foot tapped once, twice, then stilled. "They watchin' me, Ma," she whispered. "Let 'em," I said. "They been watchin' all your life. Might as well give 'em something worth looking at." She smiled without showing teeth, the way her grandmother used to when she was about to prove somebody wrong. The pastor spoke first, his voice smooth, practiced. He said all the right things about eternal rest and blessed assurance. But my mind drifted to the kitchen, where Mama used to hum over a pan of cornbread, her voice like honey thick on the air. Joylene's hand brushed against mine, grounding me back in the present. Then the pastor said, "Now we'll hear a few words from the family. Sister Joylene will be reading today's eulogy." A whisper ran through the pews. I caught the look on Shine's face, shock wrapped in politeness. She didn't know I'd told the pastor myself. I watched her jaw tighten, but she didn't speak. Joylene stood. The deep plum dress caught the light just so, the gold chain at her throat gleaming against brown skin. She walked slow, careful, as if each step were testing the ground. When she reached the podium, she unfolded the paper and looked out over the crowd. That's when I realized how quiet it had gotten. Even the babies seemed to hold their breath. She cleared her throat, glanced once at me. I nodded. "Good morning," she said. And with that, the room began to change. Joylene looked down at the paper, then back up at all those faces that had seen her grow from a wild-haired child into the woman they whispered about. Her first words came out small, almost a whisper. Grandma used to say we all born with a sound. Some folks sing, some folks shout, some just breathe loud enough to be heard. She paused, glanced toward the casket. She told me not to ever be ashamed of mine. A ripple moved through the pews. Some leaned in, others looked at the floor. Joylene kept going. When I was little, she'd let me read scripture to her. I'd stumble, get my words tangled, and she'd laugh and say, "It don't matter if you trip over it, baby, long as you finish the walk." A low chuckle rolled through the room. It wasn't mocking this time. It sounded like remembering. She took a slow breath. Grandma ain't have much, but she had truth, and sometimes truth don't come out clean. Sometimes it come out sounding like mine. Her voice steadied, the rhythm of it spreading through the air like a hymn. She cleaned houses for 37 years, some of the people she worked for sitting here today. Y'all know she ironed y'all's shirts, babysat your babies, prayed for you when you didn't even know it. But you know what she never did? She never changed her sound to please nobody. An older man coughed, cleared his throat loud, but didn't look up. Joylene turned a page. The sunlight shifted across her face, leaving one side bright, the other in shadow. When she came home at night, she'd still hum, still talk to God in that same voice folks said was too country. I used to tease her. I'd say, "Grandma, you know God can hear you fine without all them twangs." And she'd say, "That's how he know it's me." A few people laughed softly. The tension eased just a little. Then her tone dropped lower. "So today, if my sound don't suit you, I'm sorry. But this is the only one I got, and it's the one she gave me." She lifted her eyes again, the tears standing there like light in water. I tried to be quiet for a long time, tried to fit in, talk right, make folks comfortable, but Grandma said comfort don't change the world, truth do. The organist shifted on the bench, maybe thinking she'd finished, but she wasn't done. She loved this church, Joylene went on, but she also knew it could be cruel. Some of y'all judged her for taking on other people's wash instead of letting the Lord provide. But the Lord provided through her hands. She taught me that work is holy, even when it gets your knees dirty. Her voice broke then, just once, a crack that made everybody look up. She pressed her lips together until it passed. "I wanted to thank her," she said, "but I didn't get the chance, so I'm thanking her now, in front of y'all, in the same sound she gave me." She folded the paper halfway, looked straight at the row where Shine sat stiff as a fence post. "You told me my accent too ghetto for this pulpit. Maybe it is, but Grandma ain't in this casket worried about grammar. She's with God, and I bet he understand every word I say." A long silence followed. The only sound was someone's soft crying from the back row. Then Joylene's mouth trembled into the smallest smile. "If y'all want perfect, you better wait for the choir," she said. And a few people actually laughed. Real laughter this time, the kind that makes tears roll faster. She took a breath, like she was gathering herself for one last climb. "Grandma used to tell me the Lord don't need translators. So if this sound reach him, that's all that matters." She laid the paper on the podium, fingers resting on it. "That's all I wanted to say." The last word hung in the air a long time, longer than anyone expected. Joylene didn't move right away. The paper stayed under her hand, her knuckles pale against it. Then she said quietly, "There's one more thing Grandma wanted me to say." You could feel everyone straighten, a rustle of clothes, a creak of wood. She wasn't reading now, she was remembering. She told me not to let family shame me into silence. Her eyes flicked toward Shine, then back to the casket. Said the folks that love you ought to love the whole of you. Voice, scars, temper, everything. Someone in the front whispered a prayer. She told me one day this church was going to need the kind of love that don't look clean, the kind that been through something. Her voice deepened. She said, "When that day come, I hope they remember how to listen." The words seemed to settle over everyone like dust, glinting in the light. Joylene looked at her own daughter sitting beside me. "Ania, baby," she said softly, "don't ever change the way you talk for nobody. Your sound come from women who worked and prayed and laughed through pain. You carry that." The child nodded, wide-eyed. The whole church could see it, generation passing to generation, no preacher needed. For a moment, the only sound was the flutter of paper as Joylene folded the eulogy again. Then she lifted her face, tears slipping free, and said, "Grandma, I hope you hear me. I hope you know I finally found the courage." A murmur rippled through the room, part grief, part relief. Then, from the back, a voice called, "We hear you, baby." It broke whatever was left of the wall between them. People began nodding, murmuring yes, amen, go on. Joylene pressed her hands flat on the podium, trembling now, but unashamed. "That's all I ever wanted," she said, "to be heard." The organist, bless her heart, let her fingers drift across the keys, a soft chord that filled the silence. It wasn't planned. It was just right. Joylene stepped away from the microphone, tears shining on her cheeks. Aunt Shine stood slowly, one hand on the pew for balance. Her mouth opened like she might say something sharp, but all that came out was a sigh. "Lord, she sound just like Mama." That was it. No more judgment, no more hiding. The truth had already been spoken. Joylene walked down the aisle, head high, eyes wet. People reached for her hands as she passed. Some whispered thank you, some just touched her sleeve. The sunlight through the open door turned her hair into a crown. And sitting there, I thought, every woman in this family been fighting to be heard. I didn't even notice my own tears till Ania reached over and wiped them with her little palm. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering a few petals from the wreath on the door. The church bell started to ring, slow and steady. That was the sound of the truth finding its way home. After the service, the crowd drifted out in slow clusters, the way people do when they don't quite know what to say. The air outside was bright and heavy with the scent of cut grass and exhaust. I stayed near the doorway, shaking hands, letting the sound of it all wash over me, sniffles, polite laughter, the low hum of relief that comes after a storm. Joylene was still inside, talking quietly with the pastor. I could see her through the open doors, standing beside the podium, the paper folded tight in her hand. She looked small for a moment, almost shy, like the power she'd just called up was too big to hold. Then she took a breath, squared her shoulders, and smiled at something the pastor said. Aunt Shine came up beside me, adjusting her hat. Her eyes were red around the edges. "She surprised me," she said finally. I nodded. She surprised herself. Shine sniffed, the old habit of pride fighting its last battle. "Didn't sound half bad once she got going. Sounded like Mama." "That's because it was Mama talking through her," I said. For once, Shine didn't argue. She just stood there a while, staring at the sunlight hitting the stained glass windows. "Guess I forgot what that sounded like," she murmured. Inside, the choir began stacking chairs, the last of the flowers being gathered up. I walked back in, the boards creaking under my shoes. Joylene turned when she heard me. "You still mad I did it?" she asked. "Mad?" I shook my head. "Baby, I've been waiting my whole life to hear you sound that free." She laughed softly, wiped at her face. "I thought they was gonna throw me out." "They couldn't. You already owned the room." We walked together down the aisle, her hand hooked through my arm. Outside, a few women from the church came over. The same ones who'd whispered about her voice earlier. One of them, Sister Davis, the one who never smiled, reached out and took Joylene's hand. "Child," she said, "that was the prettiest truth I done heard in a long time. Joylene blinked, unsure. Thank you. Another woman said, made me think of my own grandmama. She talked like that too. I miss hearing it. That's how it started, the slow turning. The judgment melting into understanding. You could see it on Shine's face when she finally came over. She didn't say sorry, she wasn't built for that, but she straightened Joylene's collar and said, your grandma would have been proud. Then she walked away before Joylene could answer. Later that evening, at Shine's house, the family gathered again, this time quieter. The plates of leftover food sat on the counter, the laughter softer, genuine. Joylene sat in the kitchen with Ania on her lap, humming one of Mama's hymns. Nobody told her to hush. I stood in the doorway watching. The golden light from the setting sun poured through the window, touching her hair, her hands, the little girl's face. That same hum filled the room, the sound of peace finding its way in. When I turned, Shine was behind me. She said, you always knew she had it in her. Not knew, I said, hoped. She smiled then, a small, tired curve of her mouth. Well, hope paid off. We sat at the table, drinking coffee gone lukewarm. For once, the silence between us wasn't sharp. It was soft. Outside, crickets started up, that first hint of night slipping in. I thought about Mama's words in that dream, don't let 'em steal her sound. They hadn't. They'd tried, but she'd taken it back. Joylene came in, kissed my cheek, said, I'm going to take Ania home, Ma. She looked lighter somehow, like she'd put something down. You okay? I nodded. I'm better than okay. She smiled, that same quiet smile from the podium. Good. I got something I want to start writing, maybe stories. Grandma used to say words heal. I reached out, squeezed her hand. Then write, baby. Don't wait for nobody's permission. When she left, I sat by the window with my coffee, watching her car's taillights fade down the street. The night pressed close around the house, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt like a full breath finally released. In the days that followed, the house stayed full of voices. Folks kept dropping by with covered dishes and condolences, the way people do when they don't quite know what else to offer. The front room smelled of casseroles and lilies long past their prime. Every time the door opened, a new story about Mama came tumbling in, how she once fixed a neighbor's dress, how she'd scolded a deacon for stealing church pies, how she always said, don't let your faith sit idle. Joylene listened to them all, smiling a little, nodding, saying thank you over and over. She never mentioned the eulogy. She didn't have to. It hung in the air, quiet and undeniable, like perfume on Sunday clothes. One afternoon, she came by with Ania. The girl ran straight for the porch swing, her braids flying. Joylene followed slower, wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt. No makeup, no performance, just herself. She sat beside me, exhaled. I've been thinking about taking some night classes, she said. Get my LPN license, move up a little. I smiled. What made you change your mind? She shrugged. Guess I realized I already know how to speak for myself. Might as well do the work that come with it. We rocked there a while, the boards creaking in rhythm. Across the street, kids played basketball, the ball thudding soft against the asphalt. A warm breeze carried the smell of somebody's barbecue. Life was still happening, like it always does after loss. Inside, Shine was helping sort Mama's old things. I could hear her humming through the window. Every now and then she'd come out with something, a scarf, a framed photo, and ask, You want this? We'd nod or shake our heads. No sharp words, no side eyes. Just the slow settling of old dust. That evening the pastor stopped by. He was a good man, a little proud but kind. Sister Ora Mae, he said, that girl of yours spoke from the heart. Folks been talking about it all week. Said it reminded them what real faith sound like. I thanked him, though my throat felt thick. When he left, I watched his car roll down the street and thought about how strange it was, how one honest voice could shift a whole room, sometimes a whole town. Later that night, I found Shine sitting on the porch steps, holding Mama's old handkerchief. The air was cooler now, the sky turning violet. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to hate how I talked too. Went off to college trying to lose it. Took me years to realize I was erasing myself." I didn't interrupt. She kept her eyes on the streetlights flickering on. Guess I just didn't want Joylene to get laughed at like I did. "She's strong enough to handle it," I said. Shine nodded. "She proved that." For a while we sat in silence, fireflies blinking out in the yard. Then she sighed. "Mama always said our sound carried history. I think I finally hear it." Inside, the clock chimed. The house felt lighter, the grief turning soft around the edges. Joylene came to the door, calling for Ania. Her voice drifted through the night, that same melody I used to hush her with when she was small. And I realized something simple but sharp. The world had tried to quiet us for generations, but somehow the sound had kept traveling, through work, through laughter, through eulogies spoken plain. I whispered to myself, "Lord, don't ever let us lose it." Weeks passed. The lilies were gone, the sympathy cards stacked in a drawer, the casseroles long eaten. What lingered was the calm that comes after a hard truth finally gets said. I could feel it every morning when I made my tea, the quiet hum of peace running under the day. Joylene stopped by most evenings on her way home from class. She'd wear her scrubs, a light jacket, sometimes a head wrap tied quick at the door. Ania would run ahead, drop her backpack by the couch, and sprawl out with her crayons. The house, once heavy with sorrow, began to sound like laughter again. One night Joylene leaned against the counter, sipping sweet tea. "Ma," she said, "you ever think Grandma knew we'd end up like this? All this noise, all this talk about voice?" I smiled. She knew. She just had to live long enough for us to catch up. Joylene laughed. "You always make it sound like she planned everything." "Maybe she didn't plan it," I said. "Maybe she just trusted it." She went quiet, tapping her nails against the glass. "When I was at work today, this nurse asked me to read to a patient. She said my voice was comforting. Can you believe that?" "Believe it?" I said. "I've been waiting for the world to notice." Joylene looked at me, eyes bright. "Guess I found my sound, huh?" "You been had it," I said. "You just stopped apologizing for it." She laughed again, that full laugh I hadn't heard in years, the kind that fills a room like sunlight. Even Shine, who dropped by to bring a pie, started laughing too. It was the first time in a long while that our family's sound was pure joy. Later, when the house was quiet again, I sat on the porch watching the streetlights come on one by one. A train horn moaned far off. I thought about Mama, about the iron and the starch, about how her humming used to rise through the walls and keep us company. That sound lived on in Joylene, in Ania, in me. The night air was soft against my skin. I could almost hear Mama's voice, low and certain. "Don't ever hush what God gave you." I whispered back, "We won't, Mama, not ever." The camera of memory pulled back there, me in my chair, porch light haloing my head wrap, the city alive beyond the yard. You could see the story's end in the calm of my hands, in the easy swing of the chair, in the gold light on the window behind me. And if you're still listening, maybe you felt it too, the way truth can sound rough and holy at the same time. Maybe you know somebody who's been told to quiet down, to smooth their edges, to fit a voice that ain't theirs. Don't let them. I tell stories like this because somebody somewhere needs to hear their own sound in it. If real stories move you, stay with me, listen close, and tell me, what would you have done if they'd called your voice too ghetto?